It's kind of a calling. I don't really know any hunters who really begun any other way than hearing their first ghost in their first house, not by accident, but design, but not your design. I say it's a kind of calling. I remember so well. I was a young man. I was living in an old butler's room in an old mansion house in the Midlands. It was a cold, hard winter, and we had a friend to stay, and we were chatting late into the night, when all of a sudden there was a sound like terror up the stairs. A wind, Babs. The house had 14 cats, which made so much noise it hid all other noise. And then there was a loud bang, bang, bang on our door, and all the door buckled and bent and moved on its rocks. Well, I got out my mace, a large, ugly thing. I had bought it as a boy in Italy. And I got it out, and behind me was my partner, and behind her my friend. And like so many members of a Scooby-Doo's gang, we opened the door and craned our heads round. And there was of course nothing at all. And we went upstairs and downstairs and wondered if we'd been called, but nothing. And we were just going to give up when, oh, there's always a when, a boyfriend of one of the other tenants came in and said, "Oh, have you seen the ghost?" And we said, "Ghost?" And he said, "Yes. It's said the manor is haunted, this staircase, because a century ago or more, a servant maid hung herself in the basement, and you can still hear the sound of her footprints going down, and those that found her running up." And he showed us where she'd hung herself on that cold November day. We asked, of course, the owner, and the owner denied knowledge and just said, "It must be the cats." Well, years later, we lived in an old house ourselves. And when people said they saw things moving, we just said, "It's just a house. You're not used to a house this old." And when people muttered that in olden days a dog had lived here that had been so terrified by the ghost that people moved, I closed my ears. I didn't want to know. I already knew the house had a memory, from the smells that would happen, like old mutton chops in a room that hadn't been used for a kitchen for 100 years. Tricks of the light, perhaps. Memories and mutterings of a house that once knew the Civil War. Perhaps. But once hunting has got you, it keeps you. And in none of these stories could I ever say I actually saw the ghost. Only that one. I'd gone to visit an aunt. She was a plucky aunt in the south coast, and she came when I opened her door. She came to me smiling and said, "Tonight we are going to spend the night in a haunted house, for I know you like such a thing." Well, I hadn't bought any of my paraphernalia, but I always travel with a thermometer, of course. So, taking that in hand, we went later that evening, around 10 o'clock, to the house. Now, she had told me in the meantime that, 200, 300 years ago, a servant maid had been murdered there by her jealous lover. and then the jealous lover had been taken and hung outside the house. And men said that as he hung, he screamed that she still watched him. And since then, they had played hide and seek on this, the anniversary of their death, in that strange house. And it'd been empty. 50 years, I would have thought. The roof was going, and it had that smell of mildew you get in these old houses that nobody can live in anymore. When we went in, the light was already bad. We lit a torch, and a lantern. And my aunt said, "I don't think anything will happen until nearly 12. And I said, "But it's 10 now, let us explore." And so we went to the kitchen. And it was a great and fine kitchen, an old coaching establishment perhaps. But it was empty, and the sounds were only mice. And as the time moved on, even they grew quiet. And we went then to the scullery and all the offices downstairs. Coming at last to the servants' staircase, we climbed up, creak, 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 and came into the main living room, the hall, the drawing room, all empty and sad. Now, amongst many other things, I love taking photos, so I took many a study of my aunt in the gloom, against the old furniture, some of which rotten, 50 years old or more, was there in the house. And it was strange. There were even knives and forks around, as if the last inhabitants had been hounded out, and none had dared come back. Well, time moved on. It was soon 11:15 when we moved upstairs to the main bedrooms. And these were noble rooms, with beds so lopsided you couldn't believe. The feathers had collapsed. I remember I bounced on one. And as I bounced on one, suddenly my aunt stood up still and listened. But what with the creaking of the bed, I could hear nothing. At last we came back to the staircase that must lead up to the servants' halls. And my aunt whispered, "It's there that it happened." And we looked up into the dark, and for a moment, almost, my aunt's heart failed her. And then I heard something. She had sharper hearing than me. I knew that. There was a footfall on the stairs below. Creak, creak, creak. I shone the torch down, and I saw nothing. Nobody. My aunt had retreated back into the main bedroom. I had followed her, meaning to say, "We've got to get up before it comes." But she was pointing to another door that led to a back staircase to the servants' rooms. I hadn't seen it before, but she wanted to go this way, where all was silent. So I followed her, lighting up the room I'd been in one last time, with my torch set not on normal light, but that purple light in which you see whatever you may see. And suddenly, shining purple, I saw a face, worn out with old passions, eyes set, beyond tired, beyond mad, to furious. But for a moment, and then my torch lost it. I did not tell my aunt, but followed up the staircase that was quiet, and we came into those low sorts of rooms, the sorts that servants use. As the clock downstairs chimed 11:15. and suddenly a door slammed below. There was something like feet moving backwards and forwards, as if somebody was looking down in the main bedrooms, the ones we had come from, looking. Suddenly, the door we had came up was opened. My aunt fair screamed, and we ran into the smallest of the chambers as something came up the stairs. You could see it. You couldn't see it in the dark, but you could feel it. Whiskey. I shone my purple light torch, and again for a moment we caught the glint of eyes, and it was gone. Looking, always looking, and then behind us, in the very room we were, we felt fear. Fear as I'd seldom felt it before. My aunt screamed. We ran forward, dodging past the unseen presence of the man, coming to the master staircase, and my aunt was for flying down. But I had come too far for that. I stood on the other side of the landing from the main rooms of the servants, just waiting. I'd felt this fear before, in that old, cold manor house in the Midlands. Suddenly there was, I would like to say it was a scream. Sometimes I remember it as that, but more it was just the echo of a scream, the knowledge that something had happened. And then footfalls. Absolutely certain this time, heavy, going to the stairs. I shone my UV light and could see nothing at first. Nothing at all. As for a moment the sound stopped, then suddenly my light picked up a form, a man, and on his back a woman. And as we watched, he threw her down the stairs, and she was lost. Only a loud crash from below. And for a moment the man stood there, and I could have sworn he had a halter on his neck, and his eyes were staring not with terror, but the muzziness of death. And then he was gone. Well, I took my aunt down, led her to her house, gave her sweet tea, and by the morning she was full of her adventure. And me, I bought flowers and made a point of going to the grave of the servant woman that was in the churchyard, and strange to say, already had fresh flowers on it, to which I added mine on the anniversary of her death.